The Alpha King gave her one night to prove she was his mate. By dawn, she was gone, and so was his heir. The test was folded in half. She had done it herself. Twice. Pressing the crease with her thumbnail the way you press a letter you're not sure you want to mail. She put it in her jacket pocket, left side, where she kept things she needed to not look at. The gas station bathroom smelled like pine cleaner and old regret. The mirror above the sink had a crack running from the bottom left corner to the top right, and her reflection came in two pieces, the left half of her face slightly lower than the right. She had been staring at it for 4 minutes. She knew this because the automatic light had blinked off twice, and she'd waved her arm in the dark to bring it back both times. Her name was Lena. Lena Vale. 24 years old. Former member of the Ashwood Pack, which is a fancy way of saying she'd spent most of her life being the last one invited to everything and the first one blamed when anything went wrong. She had the particular posture of someone who learned very early that standing straight got you noticed, and getting noticed got you trouble, so she'd spent years training herself into a kind of useful invisibility, shoulders slightly in, chin slightly down, eyes that looked bored even when her chest was doing something complicated. She didn't look bored right now. Right now she was eating a granola bar over a gas station sink and trying to decide if she was hungry or just doing something with her hands. She was not hungry. She ate the whole thing anyway. The drive to the palace from here was 40 minutes. She'd already done the math. She'd already made the decision. She had already decided 3 days ago, then unmade it, then remade it, then cried in her car in a parking lot at 2 in the morning, then remade it again with the kind of grim, bone-tired calm that comes after you've run out of other options and you're left with the only real one. She was going, not because she wanted to pass, not because she believed in the trial, not because she had any real hope that the night would end in any way that looked like a normal ending. She was going because she needed him to know she had been there. She needed him to watch her walk in, and she needed him to watch her walk out, and she needed the distance between those two things to mean something to him later, when she was already gone. She finished the granola bar, crumpled the wrapper, dropped it in the bin. She drove to the palace. The Hall of Proof was 300 years old, and it looked it. Lena had heard about it her whole life, the way you hear about things that happen to other people, in pieces, second-hand, shaped a little differently every time. She'd heard it was vast. It was. She'd heard the ceilings were high enough to make you feel small. They were. She'd heard the chandeliers were made from the antlers of every alpha who'd ever died in service to the pack. She looked up at them once. Just once. Then she looked at the floor. The floor was old stone, worn smooth in the middle, where generations of feet had walked, and the edges were original, rough cut, uneven, still holding the shape of the mountain they'd been quarried from. Someone, years ago, had patched a cracked tile near the center of the room with grout that didn't match. The patch was a slightly different shade of gray. It had been there long enough to look almost intentional. Lena noticed it immediately. She filed it away. There were 50 people in the room, and she knew none of them by name, which was fine. She didn't want names. Names were how you got attached to the room, and she did not want to be attached to this room. She counted the exits instead. 2 main doors, one side door near the back, half hidden behind a column, a high window on the east wall, propped open an inch to let in the night air. She had parked her car at the far end of the lot, nose out. Her mother had taught her that, the way you park when you might need to leave fast. Her mother had needed to leave a lot of places fast. Lena had inherited the habit the way you inherit the good silverware, not because anyone sat you down and explained its value, but because one day you just noticed it in your hands. 3 women sat along the far wall, separated from the main group. They had the look of people who'd been waiting too long in formal clothes, a particular kind of tired that lives in the shoulders. They were the ones who had already tried tonight, who had stood in the ring and reached for a bond that either wasn't there or was there and got them nowhere. She looked at them carefully, not with pity, with recognition. She knew that posture. She had worn it a lot. The elder, an old woman with silver hair pulled flat against her skull and eyes that had seen 4 generations of Alpha Kings do foolish things, stood at the head of the room, and called Lena's name the way you'd read an item off a list. Lena walked to the ring. Caden was already there. She had told herself she was prepared for him. She was not prepared for him. He was the kind of man who took up space without seeming to try. Not loud, not performing, just present in a way that rearranged the room slightly around him. He was built like someone who had been working since he was 15 and never stopped. He wore his authority the way some people wear old boots, not like it was a costume, but like it had been broken in slowly and now it just fit. Gorgeous in every way that made women do things they'd later describe as temporary insanity. Lena had met him 3 months ago, in circumstances she was not going to think about right now, because right now she needed her face to do normal things, and thinking about 3 months ago made her face do the opposite of normal things. He saw her. She watched it happen, the precise moment his eyes found her across the ring. He went still, not surprised still, recognition still, the way you go still when something you've been looking for walks through a door you forgot you left open. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, and then she looked at the floor. The mismatched tile was 12 feet to her left. She memorized its exact location. The elder spoke for 4 minutes. Lena counted. The terms were simple and ancient and designed, she understood, for a world where people believed the bond was proof of something real. One night. The ring. Both parties must open to the pull voluntarily. It couldn't be forced, couldn't be faked, couldn't be performed. The king would feel the truth of her, or he would not. The bond was either present, or it was an absence dressed up in a nice room. The elder looked at her. You understand the terms. It was not a question. Yes, said Lena. The elder looked at Caden. Some silent thing passed between them. She'd been his elder since he was 9 years old, and some conversations have gotten small enough they don't need words anymore. He nodded. The elder said, "Begin." Lena thought, well, here we are. She opening the bond, actually opening it, the way the trial required, felt like unlocking a door you'd spent 3 months stacking furniture against. She didn't open it all the way. She opened it the way you open a window in winter, enough to let in the air without letting in the cold. Enough to not be a liar, not enough to be ruined. She let him feel her edges, the outline of her, the shape of the door, without the room behind it. Across the ring, something happened in Caden's face. It happened slowly, which was somehow worse than if it had happened fast. She watched it move through him, first a stillness, then something that looked like attention, sharp and focused, the way a person goes quiet when they hear a sound they recognize from a dream. Then something else, something that was almost confusion, but heavier. He took a step forward. The elder raised one hand. He stopped. Lena had been watching the tile. She made herself look up. He was looking at her, the way people look at something they've been carrying for a long time without realizing they were carrying it, like he'd just noticed the weight of it, and the noticing was both a relief and an arrival. She looked back at the tile, the grout that didn't match, the person who'd chosen it, who had stood there with a cracked floor and a tub of the wrong color, and had decided anyway, this is what I have, and this is what I'll use. Not because it was perfect, because the floor needed fixing, and this was what there was. She thought about that person for the next 6 minutes. The trial had a midpoint, which felt very formal and very strange. The elder announced it. A bell rang, an actual bell, old copper, hung near the back wall. The room shifted slightly, bodies adjusting, people remembering to breathe. The elder said, "The king will speak his knowing." This was the part Lena had been warned about, and then chosen not to think about, and then spent 3 nights not sleeping over. The king was required to speak aloud what the bond had told him about her. Not her history, not her name, not her rank, but who she was. The thing underneath the outline. The thing you couldn't see unless you were paying the kind of attention that changed you a little. The bond was a 2-way window. Whatever she let through, he could see, and what he had seen in the last hour, even through the outline she'd given him, even through the carefully controlled edges, had apparently been enough. He spoke. His voice was low and even and had the kind of steadiness that isn't the same as calm. It was the steadiness of someone who has learned to hold still even when things are loud inside. He said, "She protects things by refusing to let them near her." The room was quiet. He said, "She has learned that need is a debt she will be charged for eventually, so she pays in advance by needing nothing." Lena's hands, at her sides, were perfectly still. She was looking at the tile. He said, she would rather leave than be asked to stay and say no, because saying no means she was asked. Being asked means someone thought she might say yes, and she has been disappointed by that particular sequence of events enough times to understand that the safest version is the one that starts with her already at the door. The room was so quiet she could hear the candles. She looked up from the tile. She looked at Caden. He was watching her with an expression she did not have a name for, which was a problem, because she had names for most things. She said, "He's getting warmer." Somewhere in the room one person laughed. Just once. Then stopped. The elder's face did not move. "The trial proceeds," she said. "1 hour of private counsel. Then return." The antechamber smelled like candle wax, and every political decision that had ever been made in a small room by people who were trying not to show how much was at stake. There was a window. Long, narrow, the kind that let in a column of outside air that smelled like pine and cold stone. Lena went to it immediately, not because she wanted the view, but because she needed something to face that wasn't him. She heard him cross the room. He stopped a few feet behind her. She looked out the window. She could see the parking lot from here. Her car was visible, the only one parked at the far end, nose pointing toward the exit. "I know what this is," he said. She kept looking at the car. "Tell me you know what this is," he said. "I know exactly what this is." A silence. The kind that has weight. "Then why," he said, "do you feel like you're already somewhere else?" She did not answer that. He moved. Not closer, just different. She could feel him thinking, which was a thing she had noticed about him 3 months ago and filed under things that were going to be a problem, he thought visibly. Not loudly, visibly. You could watch the shape of it move through him. "What do you need?" he said. "To stay." She had prepared for a lot of versions of this conversation. She had prepared for anger. She had prepared for command. She had prepared for the particular kind of silence that powerful people use when they want you to fill it with a yes. She had even prepared for something that looked like tenderness, which she had planned to be suspicious of. She had not prepared for the question to be that honest. She turned from the window, not to face him, just to face a different section of wall. "I needed it 3 months ago," she said. She said it quietly, the way you say things you've been carrying a long time, not loud, just set down. He didn't say anything, which was the right answer actually, which was the answer that hurt the most, because it meant he understood, and understanding came with no mechanism for fixing it. She looked at the floor. No cracked tiles here, just smooth stone, continuous, uninterrupted. Someone had been very careful with this floor. She thought about the test in her pocket. She did not put her hand on it. She thought, "There will be a moment when I have to leave this room, and I will leave it, and I will not look back, and the thing I am not touching right now in my pocket will go with me, and that is the correct decision, and I have made the correct decision, and the fact that it feels like removing something from a wound does not mean it is the wrong decision. It means it is a real one. I'm going to go back in there," she said, "and I'm going to confirm the bond, because it exists, and lying about it would be pointless, and honestly, a little embarrassing. And then, I'm going to decline the formal claim, and then I'm going to leave." A long pause. "Lena, I am not angry at you," she said. Which was almost true. "This is not punishment. I am not doing this to hurt you." She turned and looked at him then, because she needed him to hear the next part, and she needed to be looking at him when she said it. "I am doing this because it's the correct decision. For the reasons you already know, if you've been paying the kind of attention you've been pretending to pay." He looked at her. He said, "I've been paying attention." "I know," she said. 3 months too late." She turned back to the window. The car was still there, nose out, waiting. They stood in the antechamber for the full hour, not talking, not talking, something in between, 2 people in a room that had run out of words and hadn't yet decided what to do about that. 15 minutes before they had to go back, he moved. Not the bond, He didn't reach through the bond, he reached for her hand. Her actual hand, the one at her side, which had been still for the last 40 minutes and had developed a kind of wooden stillness from the effort of staying that way. He didn't hold it, he just placed his fingers over hers. Lightly, the way you rest your hand on a surface when you're not sure if it will hold your weight. She hadn't been touched in 3 months. Not really. Not like that. Not in the way that gets past the surface and lands somewhere deeper. She'd been touched in the normal ways of living. A shoulder brush in a hallway. A handshake. Once a woman at the grocery store had grabbed her arm when she dropped something. But not like this. Not in the specific way of someone who was choosing to touch her on purpose, without a reason except the choice itself. The part of her that had been standing in doorways since she was 19 years old walked through one. The bond cracked open like a window someone had been leaning against for a long time, and everything she had been holding behind the outline, all of it, 3 weeks of it, the test folded twice, the gas station mirror coming in 2 halves, her name said once out loud in an empty car at 2 in the morning just to hear how it sounded, the granola bar she hadn't tasted, the parking space nose out, the way she'd calculated the distance from here to 4 hours north and decided it was exactly right. All of it went through. All of it. In under 2 seconds. Caden went completely still. She felt him feel it. All of it. The whole unedited version. She pulled back. Closed it. Clean, fast, intentional. The way you shut a door before you've made up your mind about it. That was a mistake, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady. She was very proud of her voice right now. He said nothing. She did not look at him. She looked at the floor again. The smooth floor, careful and uncracked. Someone very patient had laid this floor. Someone who had cared about it lasting. She thought about that. She thought, some things last. Some things get laid carefully by people who intend them to last, and they do. And some things get cracked and patched with the wrong color grout, and they last too, just differently, she thought. That's enough thinking about the floor now. The bell rang. 1 hour was up. She walked back into the hall. She stood in front of the elder. The elder looked at her with those 4 generations' eyes, which had seen enough to be quiet about most things. Does the bond exist? The elder asked. Yes, said Lena. Do both parties confirm its presence, freely and without coercion? Caden was standing 10 feet to her left. She did not look at him. Yes, she said. A small ripple moved through the room. The kind of ripple that happens when people realize the night has turned the corner they thought it would, and they are already preparing the shape of the next few hours. The announcement, the seating arrangements, the celebrations, the politically careful conversations about what this means for the Iron Veil line. Then, under the laws of the Iron Veil Pact, the bond is confirmed, and the formal claim, I decline the formal claim, said Lena. The ripple stopped. The room went a different kind of quiet. The kind that happens when something breaks that wasn't supposed to be able to break. The elder looked at her for a very long moment. The bond is confirmed. The law. The law gives the confirmed mate the right to decline the formal claim. I know the law. She had looked it up. She had looked it up 11 days ago in a library 2 towns over using a card she'd borrowed, and she had read the relevant passage 4 times and then sat in the library parking lot for 30 minutes before she drove home. I am exercising that right. A longer silence. This is unprecedented, said one of the elders near the back, a man with the kind of face that was always slightly offended by things that deviated from the expected. No, it's not, said Lena. It happened in 1887. A confirmed mate named Reva Ostwick declined the formal claim citing irreconcilable difference of timing. The precedent exists. I'm citing it. The room was extremely quiet. The elder with the 4 generations' eyes looked at her for a very long moment. Then something moved in her expression. Not quite a smile. The ghost of a reaction. There and gone. She said, the claim is declined by right. The confirmed bond stands. The trial is complete. Caden said her name. Just once. Just her name. Nothing else. She heard how he said it. She filed it in the same place she'd filed his hand on hers, and the particular way he'd gone still when he'd felt all of it, and the thing he'd said in the antechamber about paying attention. She filed all of it somewhere she was not going to visit frequently. She walked out. The car was where she'd left it. Of course it was. She had parked it in a place where leaving was simple, and simple things had a way of staying exactly where you put them. She got in. She started the engine. She pulled out of the lot. She did not look in the rearview mirror. She had made a rule about rearview mirrors before she left the gas station this morning, and she was keeping it. The drive north was smooth, the kind of night driving that empties your head out, not because nothing is in it, but because the dark and the motion and the steady white lines of the road create a kind of pressure that flattens things for a while, makes them manageable, postpones them. She drove for 4 hours. She thought about the tile. She thought about the grout that didn't match, about the person who had chosen it, who had stood there with a cracked floor and an imperfect solution and had made the decision anyway, not because it was ideal, but because the floor needed fixing, and this was what they had. And the floor had been fixed. For years. Visibly imperfect, not quite the right color, but holding. Still there. Doing its job. She thought about that for a long time. She thought, some things hold even when they don't match. Some things patch wrong, and hold anyway. Not perfectly, not invisibly, but they hold. Then she stopped thinking about the tile because she was getting metaphorical, and getting metaphorical at 2 in the morning on an empty highway was a specific kind of dangerous she didn't need right now. She needed practical. She needed the motel she'd booked 3 days ago. She needed to stop thinking about the way his hand had rested on hers. Not gripping, just resting, with the particular weight of someone who wasn't sure they had the right to be there but was being there anyway. She needed to not think about that. She thought about it for the next 40 miles. The motel cost $42 a night and was exactly the kind of place that existed specifically for people who needed to be somewhere that wasn't where they'd been. The room was clean, the kind of clean that isn't comfortable but is reliable. The bed had a blue comforter that had been washed so many times it had gone soft in an institutional way. The lamp on the nightstand had a pull chain that someone had tied a small bow into, which she found, for reasons she could not explain, enormously reassuring. She sat on the edge of the bed. She put her jacket on the chair, left it there. She did not take the test out of the pocket. She looked at the window. Outside was a parking lot. She had parked nose out, automatically, without thinking about it, and she'd noticed that she'd done it, and she'd thought, well, there you are. Some things become the shape of you before you even notice you're being shaped. She lay back on the blue comforter and looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had a water stain near the corner that looked vaguely like a person running. She looked at it for a while. She tried to make it look like something else. It kept looking like a person running. She thought, that's probably fine. She put her phone face down on the nightstand. She had 39 missed calls. She knew without checking whose number they were from, and she knew without having the conversation that she was not ready to have it, and she knew that not being ready was fine, and that she was allowed to be not ready, and that choosing to be somewhere that wasn't there yet was not the same as running, even if the ceiling thought otherwise. She thought about what he'd said in the antechamber. What do you need to stay? She thought about it carefully and honestly, the way she rarely let herself think about things. She needed the truth 3 months ago. She needed the conversation that hadn't happened. She needed the morning after the night that had changed things to have looked different than it did. Not worse, just different, just honest, just 2 people being honest instead of one person being a king and one person being too careful to say what she already knew. She had needed those things and they had not been given, and now there was a test in her jacket pocket and a confirmed bond and 4 hours of empty highway between her and a decision she had not yet completely finished making. Not running, she told herself. Rerouting. At 3 in the morning she got up and got a cup of water from the bathroom tap. She drank it standing up, looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, which was intact, no cracks, no tape, whole. Her reflection looking back at her complete. She thought, this is what you look like when you have made the correct decision. She thought, you look tired. She thought, yes, that checks out. She went back to bed. She turned off the lamp. The room went dark except for the thin line of parking lot light under the door. She put her hand on her stomach. Just for a moment. Just once. Just for herself. Just in the dark where no one was watching. and no one could clock it as anything except what it was: a woman in a $42 motel room with her hand over the thing she was already, quietly, fiercely, beginning to plan around. "Hey," she said, out loud, very quietly, not to the room, not to the parking lot outside, or the cracked person ceiling stain, or the bow-tied lamp chain, or any of the ordinary brave things in the room, to the kidney bean, which was what it was right now, that size, that small, that early. She'd looked it up. She'd looked everything up. She had spent 11 days reading things and calculating things and thinking things through with the particular thoroughness of someone who does not let themselves panic until they know exactly what they are panicking about. She said, "Hey, I don't know which of us is more surprised." She said, "We're going north. There's a town up there that has a good school district and a farmer's market on Sundays and a wolf community that doesn't know my last name." She said, "I have a plan." She said quieter, "I'm working on the plan." The room was very still. "You'll be okay," she said. And then, because she was alone and it was 3 in the morning and the ceiling stain looked like someone running, she let herself be honest. "We'll be okay," she said. She moved her hand. She turned onto her side. She was asleep in 11 minutes. He did not chase her. He wanted to. He stood in the palace lot for 6 minutes after the tail lights of her car disappeared around the far corner, and he wanted to get in his car and close the distance and say all the things that had been building in his chest since the moment in the antechamber when she had opened the bond all the way and he had felt everything. He had not been prepared for everything. He had been prepared for the outline she'd been giving him all night, the controlled edges, the window cracked barely open. He had been prepared for the polite performance of a bond confirmation by someone who was technically complying with the rules and spiritually somewhere else entirely. He had not been prepared for what she actually was inside. It had lasted 2 seconds and had felt like standing in a doorway in winter, and then someone inside opening a door to a warm room, and then the door shutting again before you could step in. You weren't cold before, but now you knew what warm felt like. That was worse. He stood in the lot for 6 minutes. He went back inside. He sat in the antechamber. Their antechamber, the small room that still smelled like her, like something he didn't have a name for but would recognize for the rest of his life. And he thought about what he'd felt in those 2 seconds. She had been so alone. Not tragic alone, not helpless alone, just alone in the particular way of someone who had made their peace with it so completely that the peace itself had become its own kind of cage. She had been carrying something for 3 weeks that she had not put down once, not even in her sleep, he suspected. And she had carried it here, and she had confirmed a bond she'd already decided to decline, and she had cited a legal precedent from 1887 by a woman named Reva Ostwick, and she had walked out. "What do you need to stay?" She had said, "I needed it 3 months ago." He thought about 3 months ago. He thought about the morning after, which he had handled in the exact way that powerful men handle things that scare them, efficiently, carefully, at a distance that looked like respect and was actually armor. He had given her space she hadn't asked for. He had been considerate in ways that were convenient for him. He had told himself he was being careful with her. She had been waiting for something different, and she had waited, and it hadn't come. And after enough time she had stopped waiting in the way that people stop waiting when they've decided to move on. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way a light goes out in a room someone's already left. He understood all of this now. Understanding it now was the specific punishment of having paid attention too late. He had felt something else, in those 2 seconds, something layered under everything else, not hidden exactly, just quiet, very, very quiet. The way something new is quiet before it gets loud. He sat with that. He sat with it for a long time. He thought, she confirmed the bond. She could have lied. She could have said it wasn't there, and the elder would have had no way to prove otherwise, and she would have walked out with less paper trail. But she confirmed it. He thought about why. He thought about the way she'd said, "I needed it 3 months ago." Quietly, like she was setting something down, not like she was throwing it. He thought, she came here tonight to say goodbye. She came here to let him feel the whole truth of her, so that when she was gone, he would know, completely, what he'd had, what he'd handled too carefully, what he'd lost. She had not come here to hurt him. She had come here because she needed him to understand. He thought about that for a very long time in the small room that still smelled like her. Then he went to find his beta, because there were things he needed to know, quietly, carefully, through channels that would not frighten her, and a direction he needed to understand, and a plan he was going to need to build, and it was going to have to be built in a way that respected the decision she had made, while also acknowledging that some decisions have room to be revisited when the circumstances change. He did not know what the circumstances were yet. He was beginning to understand that they had changed. Dawn came to the motel the same way it comes everywhere, sideways, gray-pink, indifferent to whatever the people inside had been going through the night before. Lena woke at 6:15 to the sound of a delivery truck in the parking lot and lay still for 30 seconds, listening, getting her bearings. Blue comforter, water stain on the ceiling, bow tie on the lamp chain. Right. She got up, she showered, she brushed her teeth. She did these things in the order she always did them, which was reassuring. Some parts of you stay the same regardless of what the night has done. She got dressed. She put on clothes that were not the ones from last night, because she had packed a bag 3 days ago, and that bag was on the chair where her jacket also was. She looked at the jacket. She looked at the left pocket. She got the test. She unfolded it. Once, then twice, flattening the creases with her thumbnail until it lay open in her hand, the result window visible and clear, and exactly what it had been for 3 weeks. She looked at it for a moment. Then she folded it back up, twice, put it in the bag, not throwing it away, keeping it. She was going to keep it, she had decided, the way you keep the first of something, not to revisit constantly, but because some things are supposed to be kept. She got her coffee from the vending machine in the hall, which was, as promised, mostly out of everything, but it had one coffee option left, and it dispensed it into a paper cup that was slightly too small, so the lid didn't quite fit, and she had to carry it carefully. She carried it carefully to her car. She sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and drank her coffee and watched the sun come up over the edge of the parking lot, which was not a particularly beautiful sunrise. Too much cloud cover, the light coming in gray and flat. But it was the sunrise that was available, and she watched it anyway. She thought about what came next. There was a town 2 hours north. She had researched it. Good school district, Sunday farmers market, wolf community that didn't know her last name. She had the name of a woman who rented a house there, small, 2 bedrooms, backyard with a fence, at a price she could manage if she picked up the 2 remote jobs she'd been in conversation about. She had not accepted those jobs yet. She was going to. She thought about Caden, sitting in that antechamber last night after she'd left. She thought about what his face had done in the 2 seconds when he'd felt all of it. She thought about the particular quality of his stillness, not frozen, not shut down, but the stillness of someone absorbing something true. She thought, he knows now. Whatever else happens, he knows. And she thought, with a care that surprised her, that knowing was probably not going to be comfortable for him. That it was going to require him to sit with something he couldn't fix immediately and couldn't command into a different shape, and that sitting with something unfixable was not something kings were generally practiced at. She hoped he would be okay. She genuinely, completely, without irony, hoped he would be okay. She started the car. She thought 2 bedrooms, one for her, one for the kidney bean. Eventually, when it became the thing after the kidney bean, and then the thing after that, she pulled out of the lot, nose out, already facing the direction she was going. She drove north. She was 4 hours gone before she let herself feel the full weight of what the night had been. It came in the way big things usually come, not like a wave, which is what people say, because waves are dramatic and have a recognizable shape, and you can see them coming. It came more like weather, like the kind of morning where you step outside and the cold hits you before you've registered that you're cold, and for a second you just stand there in it, understanding that this is the temperature now, this is what outside is, and you are going to have to adjust. She drove through it. She didn't stop, didn't pull over, didn't perform it. She just drove, and felt it, and let it be what it was. which was real, and earned, and hers. She had loved him. She was not going to say that out loud. She was barely going to think it. But it was true, and true things have a weight you feel even when you're not looking at them. Even when you're 4 hours north with your eyes on the road and your coffee long gone cold in the cup holder. She had loved him, and he had been a king first in all the moments that mattered, and she had made the correct decision, and the correct decision was the one she had made, and she was going to keep making it, one day at a time, for as long as it needed to be made. Her phone was in the glove compartment. She had put it there when she left the motel, because the missed calls had climbed to 47, and she was not ready, not yet, and not yet was allowed. The road curved north, and she followed it. The kidney bean went with her. She was already talking to it. Not out loud, just inside, where she kept the things she intended to keep. She was telling it about the town, about the house with the fence, about the farmer's market on Sundays, which she had seen in pictures and which sold, apparently, very good bread and also handmade soap, and also a kind of honey that the listing had described as local and raw and made by someone who really cared about bees. She thought, I am going to buy that honey. She thought, I am going to stand at that market on a Sunday morning in a town where no one knows my last name, and I'm going to buy bread and honey and soap, and the person next to me won't know any of what last night was, and I will say good morning, and they will say good morning back, and the ordinary thing of that will be enough. It will be enough. She drove. The sun, by now, had gotten past the cloud cover and was doing something more honest. Bright and white and no nonsense. The kind of light that doesn't make things beautiful so much as it makes them clear. The road was clear. The direction was clear. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She had decided about rearview mirrors. She looked at the road, and the road, as it turned out, was long and straight and completely, almost stubbornly, full of what came next. End.